Welcome back, City Builders. Kodiak the Kodiak here. In today's video, we're going to be going over the newest patch to City Skylines 2 version 1.1.2 F1, and also talking about some of the new features and changes that come along with it. One of these changes is the addition of DLSS to the game, and today we're going to be talking about and looking at what that actually does to the game in terms of performance and visuals. I'll also give you a brief explanation of what DLSS is. Before we get started though, about 70% of you who watch my videos are not subscribed, so if you guys wouldn't mind pressing that subscription button down below, it would mean a ton. So before we get started, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and do not forget to turn on notifications so you can keep up to date with all the City Skylines 2 news, tips, and tricks. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so in today's patch video, I'm going to just let you guys know that we're not going to go through the patch one by one. There's a lot of things that people just don't care about, or when you read it, it's like, that doesn't affect me, and it's kind of just a waste of time. So I'm going to give you guys a brief explanation of what's going on with the patch overall, and give you guys the more important changes to the game. We'll also be going over quite a few UI changes, especially to PDX Mods. A lot of them have been suggested by us, the creators, as well as you, the community, and it really makes things a lot nicer. First off, let's go over a few of the patch changes. One of them was that they fixed the grid breaking when you demolish things like a mailbox, for example. If you guys have placed a mailbox or a bus stop on the side of the road and deleted it and noticed the grid broke on that street, that no longer should be an issue anymore, which is a very nice bug fix. Another thing the patch notes was quite a few changes and fixes to the controller support to the game. This shows that they're constantly working on the console version of the game, which they did state that is a completely different team working on the console version, so it doesn't affect the development going on to the core PC version of the game if that's all you care about. It is a different team, but when improvements are made from either side, both sides benefit. So that shows that the team is active and they're making changes to how controller support works. There is currently controller support in the game, so if you are mobility impaired and require controller support in order to play these games, these are probably really good improvements for you. A lot of people think that controller support is just for people playing on controller, but a lot of people don't realize that allowing controller support allows for more accessible features for people who use unconventional controllers. This ranges from people who just have weird setups to people who have mobility issues and need to use a different form of controller. So this is a huge plus and a win from me. Now, there are quite a few changes made to the back end of the game in terms of the editor, but one of the more notable ones, at least that I saw, was adding wind editing for maps. I saw some people asking questions about this in my YouTube comments because, you know, when you go to make a map, you don't really see the ability to actually make that wind adjustment. Now, I'll leave a link down below to a no pollution mod made by Brucey Boy, which allows you to turn off wind pollution. So if you just don't want to even mess with wind in your maps, you can actually just turn that off. But if you're a map maker and you're looking to actually add a little bit of diversity and you want to actually change which direction the wind's blowing so people maybe build industries in specific areas on your maps, you can now adjust the wind on the maps in the map editor, which is great. The last thing that I can't really show you guys, but I can tell you about, is optimizations made to the game. So they claim that they made optimizations to pathfinding, the UI, as well as reducing frame spikes. That should all improve performance, which is great. Now, before we get into the big daddy of performance known as DLSS, which has been added to the game, let's actually dive into some changes made to the actual UI of the game. So here we are on the home screen, and you might notice some things have slightly changed. One of them most notably being your PDX account. It now shows your username as well as your actual thumbnail image for your account on the PDX account logo here. A small change, but a change nonetheless. Now, if we go down here to PDX Mods, we'll actually notice that a lot of the UI has changed. That loading screen is slightly different, and the splash screen for the featured page is also quite a bit different than before. When we go up here, we can now click on this. I don't believe we could click on this before, but now you can actually see it inside of here, much like you could do the change log for any of the mods, but just allows you to read it more. I think the UI is much nicer now. It actually has like a preview icon that you can actually click on if this was a featured mod up here. And if you notice, there's also a Me tab up here at the top for PDX Mods. So let's actually jump over to that first, and you can actually view your profile. So on here, you can see which creators I'm following. So you can see I'm following Triton Supreme, TW, Bad Peanut, Brucey, Clight, all great modders that I suggest you guys follow and keep an eye on. You can find links that you can actually put on your account. I'll show you guys how to do that in a minute here. I have no bio currently, but I will be updating that before this video goes live. So if you guys want to follow me over on PDX Mods, you totally can, because you guys can actually follow me because I do have some mods up on PDX Mods. I have a Ned Dirt radio, which was a custom radio made for my friend Ned Dirt. It's all music from his bands, as well as Moonbeam, Moonbeam Radio, which is a DMCA safe radio station that you guys can use in any forms of your content, whether that be Twitch or YouTube. All of that content is completely royalty and DMCA safe, so you will not get any kinds of strikes for listening to this music. You can also go and show all of the creators that you're following. So here's all of the wonderful modders that I'm currently following here on PDX Mods. And you can quickly jump over to their profile. So for example, we've jumped over to TDW's profile now, and you can see Skyve and find it. You can also follow the creators directly on here and report their profiles, but I would not suggest doing that. And if we go back over here, and let's go to Algernon, because I think Algernon's got a really rich and full profile of mods here to take a look at. You can also get links to their GitHubs and all sorts of other things, as well as their Patreons or PayPals if they have access to those. If you guys ever have free money going around and you think these modders provide you with like enough fun and joy to make the game exactly what you want it to be, I would definitely suggest throwing them a buck or two from time to time. Now, if we go back up here over to the browse section, you'll notice that the UI has changed slightly. I believe that the icons are a little smaller. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just misremembering how this is actually laid out. But if you notice, you can actually directly click on the modder's actual name from now on. So we can actually just directly click on Algernon's name and go straight to him. We can then go back again, and you can click on the name or the picture, and it takes you to the actual mod itself here. And you'll notice that things have changed slightly. So the mod maker's name is right there next to the actual name of the mod now, and you'll notice that there is a big mod info screen. Basically contains all the information you might need to know about the mod. On top of that, they've also now added a last updated detail as well, so you can see how up to date the mod is, or if the mod has been patched recently, so you know maybe how to troubleshoot some issues with your mods. It gives you the ID number. If you guys don't know what the ID number is, this is the actual ID number for the PDX mod. It will actually be at the end of the web address. So first off, you can just copy the link to the actual number. So it just copies these 5 numbers right here, or you can actually click the link button. Now, if you click the link button, what you can do is you can go over to your web browser and you can just paste that link in there, and it will take you to the PDX Mods web page version of the mod. Right now, this is actually incredibly useful because if we actually go back over to PDX Mods here and we go over to my mods list and we go over to Moonbeam Radio, you'll notice that I have some links embedded in the actual profile because it does support Markdown for the description. However, PDX Mods in-game does not support direct links as of right now. So the actual links themselves are pretty broken on every single mod. You can't just directly click any of these. However, if you wanted to access one of those links, you could click copy over here on mod info. You could go over to your web browser, paste, and go over here, and you'll notice that the links actually work. So you can actually go to the direct links that are included inside of the mods. Now, it's actually on this website of PDX Mods that you can go in and edit your profile. So all you have to do is log in, go to your profile right here, and go to My Profile. On My Profile, you can hit Edit Profile, and you can go through here and add your external links. They also now made it so you can add a Ko-Fi link, a Buy Me a Coffee link, as well as a Crowd-In external link, on top of the ones that were already previously available or that you previously saw from modders. As well as update your bio here, which it does say Markdown format is supported. So you can use Markdown to make cool changes to your bio, for example, like add bullets and things like that. Now back on PDX Mods, some other things have changed as well. If we keep scrolling down now, and let's say we want to click on Skyve. So let's say we click on Skyve, and then we're like, I'm actually done with Skyve. Normally when we would hit back, we would go back to the top of the page, and we would have to scroll all the way back down to whatever mod we were looking at before. Now, as you can tell, it automatically scrolled us back down to Skyve, which is a nice added quality of life feature that probably should have been how it was in the first place. But again, PDX Mods is in beta and they're adding the features that we're wanting. Now, if we go back into the mod profiles again and we scroll down a little bit more, you'll now notice that more about this mod contains all of the links in here for the actual mod itself. So the Discord for this is for 529 tiles by Algernon. So this will take you to Algernon's Discord, his GitHub, as well as the PDX forums, which is down over here for reporting any bugs or issues you have with the mod. Obviously, we can take a look at the change log. So for example, if we go to, we'll go to Algernon's profile here, we go to Plop the Girl Bulls, we'll notice that there was an actual change pretty recently. That's pretty great. great. Adds the option to prevent abandonment for all buildings, which is really nice for anyone looking to do any kind of detailing in City Skylines 2. It prevents all abandonment, which is very nice for all of you detailers out there. Now, obviously that was a feature before, but that's how it's organized now. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys saw the organizational structure now that things have changed. Also, do not forget to like your favorite mods. We have no idea how the algorithm works for PDX Mods yet in terms of sorting things out from popularity, so that obviously helps the modders, so make sure you like all the mods that you like. One final change before we move on is that they did fix the bug, so that way if you delete your mods, it doesn't say the mod was banned or removed, it just says it was deleted now. So obviously those were some pretty nice quality of life updates and visual UI features that were added to PDX Mods, but let's dive into something even better than that, and that's the addition of DLSS to City Skylines 2. Now, I'm constantly blown away by how many people just play City Skylines and they don't really venture around and play other games. So I want to give you guys a brief description of what DLSS actually is. Now, DLSS stands for Deep Learning Super Sampling. And without getting too much into the nitty-gritty, DLSS allows you to basically extrapolate more frames from your game than just by rendering the game out. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's say you're playing the game at 4K. You have a 4K monitor, and that's the resolution that you're playing City Skylines at. And let's say you're only able to get 30 FPS. DLSS will then in turn, depending on your settings, will, let's say, instead render the game out at 1080p rather than 4K. So at about a quarter of the resolution that it normally does, therefore using much less of your GPU because it's instead rendering the game out at 1080p rather than 4K. Then what DLSS does is it artificially upsamples or scales up the rendering at 1080p to 4K, and it does it really well. The higher the resolution you play at, so if you play at 4K, you'll see better results because there's more information for it to work from. In most games, DLSS works really well, especially when you put it on its lower end settings. The higher end settings, while they net you more FPS, look kind of bad unless you're playing at really high resolutions like 4K or 8K. For a lot of games like Cyberpunk, for example, DLSS is almost an essential need for gamers to be able to get a consistent FPS. So if you're like a lot of people, this is maybe a feature that you've really been hoping for, but I don't want to get everybody's hopes up because there are some downsides to DLSS. One of them is that DLSS is an NVIDIA exclusive feature. AMD does have their own open source version called FSR, most commonly implemented as FSR2. Well, that's not currently implemented in the game yet, so if you're using an AMD GPU, you won't really be able to utilize this feature yet. Them implementing the infrastructure to put in DLSS provides the infrastructure for them to implement FSR2 as well as a modder to go in and change the way the infrastructure is built to allow FSR2 to exist. Now, I don't know how it's properly implemented in City Skylines 2, but we've seen this in other games like Starfield, for example. If I remember correctly, Starfield only had FSR2 implemented at first, and then a modder went through and changed it to actually work with a DLSS and Intel's version for their graphics cards as well, but I can't remember the name of that one. So once the infrastructure is there, it does allow a path forward for other GPUs versions of DLSS to be implemented. But as of right now, it is an NVIDIA exclusive feature. Secondly, DLSS provides you the most performance gains when you're GPU bound. If you don't know what being GPU bound is, it just means that your computer is utilizing or maxing out its GPU rather than the CPU. So for example, when you're playing City Skylines, if your rig is mostly balanced out, in the early games of City Skylines 2, your computer will actually be GPU bound in most cases. Your CPU doesn't have a lot to process because you don't have a lot of citizens living in your city. So there's not as many intense calculations that are being done that are getting thrown on your CPU. So your game should be mostly reliant on your GPU in the early game, which is when you'll see the majority of the performance gains from DLSS. But that doesn't mean you won't see any as your game becomes CPU bound. The most I had seen on larger cities, which we'll dive into here in a minute, was about 5 FPS once things actually got going. But 5 FPS is still 5 FPS at very negligible visual loss. Especially at higher resolutions, you'll see even less visual loss for more performance gain, which is super great. However, on the flip side, if you're playing on a smaller city or something where you're more GPU bound, I've seen upwards of double the FPS. So I've gone from let's say 60 FPS upwards to 120 to even 140 FPS playing on max settings 1080p with my current system. Now, there are two other downsides to DLSS. One of them is that it can sometimes create ghosting, or little blurry waves basically behind moving objects if the objects aren't moving fast enough. As well as softening the image, a lot of times DLSS will be included alongside a sharpening slider, so you can add some sharpening back to the game after DLSS comes through and removes some of the harder edges to make it look more normal again. Sharpening usually provides it enough detail, like addition back to the game, to make it look exactly like it looked like before. And I do regret to inform you guys that as of right now, there is some ghosting that I notice, especially in higher population areas of my cities, which we'll take a look at again here in a minute, as well as the fact that there is no sharpening slider currently available in City Skylines. Now, there are some mods that allow you to add some sharpening to the game, but there should really be a vanilla way to do that, in my opinion. You shouldn't need to go to a mod just to add sharpening to the game, especially when sharpening is so important for DLSS to work. But again, this feature is fresh, you don't have to use it, and it's providing pretty significant performance gains, and I expect them to flesh it out more and more over time. So let's actually dive into a game. So we're gonna scroll down here, and we're gonna go to map Bill Silverlight. This is Bill Silverlight's map that he uploaded onto the PDX Mods workshop. And this city has about 220,000 population. So this is a big city. So this will really stress my computer and really show you guys what DLSS is able to do. Okay, so here we are in Bill Silverlight's city, and I currently do not have DLSS active. So this is just the active city right here. And if we actually hit escape and go over to options, if you're using developer mode, what I would definitely suggest doing is enabling developer mode, and then going into here and show FPS and frame time and going to precise when trying to figure out your graphic settings. Another thing is, if you notice on the left where all of the mod options are, if you've downloaded any of the mods and PDX mods, you'll know that some of the mods contain their mod options in the screen here when you hit escape. They are now alphabetically ordered. So that way you don't have to scroll around and try to decide which mod got stacked first. It is all now in alphabetical order, which is a very nice change. If we go up here to the top right, you'll notice some different numbers. So we're actually gonna go in game and let this simulate so you guys can actually see what it really looks like. So what this graph is showing is stability of frames. So the smoother the line, the more stable the frames are. Now, I usually will ignore the render in total, as I usually don't need to focus on those render times, but the ones that are gonna be really important are the FPS here at the bottom, which you can see is roughly about 35 FPS. The other really important numbers are going to be the CPU main and the GPU times. These numbers are very important because the number that is typically higher, so in this case it's bouncing around between the GPU and the CPU, but the CPU is the one that's fluttering, so I'm assuming that I'm CPU bound. Whichever number is going to be your higher render time is going to be the one that's going to be causing you the most delay in your FPS. So if your GPU is higher, that means you're GPU bound, whereas if your CPU number is higher, that means you're CPU bound. And again, DLSS is mostly on the GPU, so this won't give us that many frames, but it will definitely give us some. So I'm going to then hit escape, go into options, and go to graphics. Now, it was on by default for me the first time I booted the game up, but just so you guys know, I have it disabled right now, and you can do automatic, maximum quality balance, maximum performance, and ultra performance. If you're playing at 1080p, I would definitely suggest using maximum quality. When you play at 1080p, it only can really go down to 720p, and then it's trying to render from 720p, which is not a lot of pixels for it to work from. However, if you're at a 4K resolution and it goes down to 1440 or 1080p, it has a lot more pixels to work from to be able to generate a better quality image. So again, if you're playing at 1080p, I would definitely suggest only sticking with maximum quality. I'm on 1080p right now, so I'm going to just stick with maximum quality just for this example. But as you can see, you'll notice that the number, you can see the graph here jumped up and it went from 35 to 40. If we go back into game, you'll notice that it is actually simulating at a higher frame rate. While it's only about 4 to 5 FPS more, on average, we do still get some spikes based on whatever's simulating, but we'll also see down over here that there is some pretty significant motion blur going on down over here. This is kind of an issue with DLSS in and of itself. I don't know this is something that the developers can really change. It's just kind of a byproduct of the system. Some games you don't see it as much, but it's really more noticeable on slower motion, or when the GPU and the CPU are really stressed, it just can't keep up and it creates that blur. Now, I am only using this on the lowest settings, so just for your guys' own information, if we go to ultra performance, we'll notice that we will get a significant amount of FPS more. So now we're up to 42. And while it doesn't look like a lot to us, you'll notice that the city looks considerably worse. And if we zoom in closer to the city, and there's a lot less kind of going on in terms of our own visual performance and stuff like that. we'll notice that we're at 47 FPS. If we look down and we're not rendering a ton of stuff out, we'll notice that we'll get about up to 100 FPS on average. Now, if we go back in and we turn this off completely, you'll notice that we're down to 70 FPS when we're looking down. So that's 30 FPS difference when we're not rendering in a ton of stuff around us. And if we pan up now as well, you'll notice that we're getting about 40 FPS, which again is pretty considerable in performance increase, especially when we're CPU bound here. So I'd say that overall, this has been a pretty good implementation of DLSS, aside from the fact that we're lacking sharpening. Again, this is what the city looks like with DLSS off. And this is what it looks like with maximum quality on. You'll notice that as that car drove away, we do definitely lose some of that visual clarity. This is something that sharpening would definitely help with. But we are getting about 3 FPS more, so a little bit of performance to eke out here. And again, at higher resolutions, you'll see more of a performance gain and less of visual degradation. Now, if you guys remember earlier, I did say that in the early game, you're more GPU bound. So let's actually go over to a new save so you guys can begin to see the performance gains from a new save. So here we are on the River Delta starting tile, and I'm gonna try to avoid moving the camera while we sift through this stuff. But right now we're kind of idling around 95 through 97 FPS. So if we go on here and go to options and turn on NVIDIA DLSS Super Resolution and go to maximum quality and hit escape and turn it off, we'll now notice that we're getting 112 FPS. Again, this is because we were GPU bound. We were GPU bound, and because we were GPU bound, it's a higher number here. You can see it's not that much higher, but it is higher, and that's how you tell the difference if you're GPU or CPU bound. It does a lot more to the game. So again, if you're in a GPU bound situation, so let's say you have a really good processor, but not a very good GPU, this is going to do a lot in terms of performance for your game. If you were struggling with FPS before and you have a pretty subpar GPU, but a really high-end CPU, this is going to allow you to actually play the game at a much better FPS. Now, if we hit escape again and we really want to stretch this thing, we can go to ultra performance. Again, this is going to look terrible because I am playing at 1080p, but you'll notice that we're getting 140 FPS as we're looking at this interchange. I'm playing on mostly all max settings as well, so this is a considerable performance increase. We can also just go to automatic and let it choose which one it wants. I have no idea which setting this is, but it's giving us about 112 FPS. I would, again, not recommend putting it at automatic, and I would just recommend using maximum quality, especially for a game like City Skylines, where you really don't want it to look that bad. Obviously, you can go down and just find the one that works the best for you, but I would definitely start with the maximum quality and work your way down from there. So I hope you guys learned a few things about DLSS and understand that it's not a cure-all. Higher population cities will not see as much of a performance gain, but if you were really struggling from the GPU side of things and you do have an NVIDIA GPU, like let's say you had a 2060 and you were really just struggling to maintain 30 FPS, this will provide you with a significant performance gain, especially if your GPU bottlenecked. So while this doesn't solve all the problems for everybody in terms of performance, this will help a certain group of people who were having issues with the game in terms of their GPU's performance, which is a necessary and added addition to the game that a lot of people were asking for. So I'm glad they finally made the jump to include it. I am also very excited and hopeful that we will get access to FSR2 soon as well, so all GPUs will be able to enjoy the benefits of the artificial upsampling. Now, if there's something you guys saw in the patch notes that you think I should have included in the video, please let me know down in the comments. This is the first time I didn't read through all the patch notes on the video, so maybe I either missed something or purposely excluded it because it wasn't something that I thought you guys were really interested in, but if it was, let me know down in the comments. I'll leave a link to everything we talked about today also down in the description. I'll let you guys get on with your day and get to building. I've been Kodiak the Kodiak, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.